All right, so we are going live. Let's go ahead and drop the 30-second intro, then the promo. Welcome to Season 4, Episode 1 of the Business Communicators, the #1 podcast in the world for communications and marketing professionals. And I think that's a verifiable fact, so don't quote us on it, but we think it's verifiable. But my name is Asin, joined alongside my co-hosts Hattie Horn and Thomas Bain on this journey as we explore the world of communications and discuss the key issues and trends that impact our industry. And we are so excited to bring you this season of the podcast. And we've got a few changes and updates to provide you all here in just a few moments. But Hattie and Thomas, it's been a few months since we've gotten together and actually done a podcast. How is everything going for you guys?
It's going. Had a great summer. Now we're into fall, and I'm ready for the end of the year, believe it or not. I'm ready for the holidays because all that heat. Now I'm ready for some cool weather.
Yeah, it's going to be 95 degrees this weekend. Thomas, I know you're the weather guy. And I'm going to a Baylor football game on Saturday. So I'm not really excited about being in the sun for 4 hours at 95 degrees, but it is what it is. But Thomas, how's everything on your end?
Same. We live in Texas, so summertime is bad. Fall is amazing when it starts to drop down into the 60s at night and get up to the 80s, 90s during the daytime.
Like the 2 weeks that we actually have of it, but
it's the other season, summer and not summer in Houston, Texas.
Yeah, well, I'm really excited about the debut episode for Season 4 of the podcast. And here in just a few moments, we're going to dive into a conversation with Houston Methodist Hospital, Stefanie, Asin, and LyondellBasell's Monica Silva. We're going to discuss employee engagement and how the workplace has evolved really over the last 18 to 20 months. And after the interview, we'll wrap up the show with the latest headlines that have really impacted the communications and marketing space over the last week, and primarily Facebook and the controversies, if you will, that have impacted the company this past week. But as we teased at the top of the show, we have some big changes for Season 4 of the podcast. And Thomas, give the listeners a little insights into what's new about our show this year.
Well, first and foremost, we're now doing a live podcast at the same time. And I have to watch my mouth sometimes, especially as we have HR and internal comms people on there. This should be entertaining as we go from there. But the other thing that's interesting is we like to celebrate our wins. Is the Business Communicators is now its own LLC. It's our own company. So we are currently looking for sponsorships. We're currently having fun and always looking for story ideas. But yay, if it wasn't lunchtime, I'd have sent a bottle of champagne to Hattie and Austin for us to toast. But it's still a work day, unfortunately.
Hey, it's 5 o'clock somewhere. The Astros play in 56 minutes. So, maybe it's not too early to tailgate or drink or something like that. But maybe when you're listening to this, if you're not watching the live stream right now on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, or Twitter, maybe you can have some Baileys in your coffee on Monday morning when you're listening to this. But Hattie, so why is it important that, we're kind of taking control of the podcast, and what are you excited about?
I like the fact that we're independent. And for me, I don't know if you guys, I watch Hulu. I like TV. And Hulu, I don't know if you knew about Wu-Tang Clan, which is a hip hop group.
Oh, of
but
course.
When they started out, they wanted to be independent. They wanted to be their own thing. And it actually brought them closer. It made them better. And they had an opportunity to broaden not only their base, but be more creative. And that's what I like about us. We have an opportunity to be more creative and do more things. There was nothing wrong with being, aligned with other groups, but there's nothing like being your own boss.
Yeah, and we're really, really thrilled about that. So to give our listeners more context, we're going to bring you, on average, 3 episodes per month. We'll stream each episode live on our social media channels before releasing the episodes on Spotify, iTunes, and really wherever you get podcasts on the following Monday. So if you're watching this show live right now, feel free to drop in a comment or question below, and we'll try to get to as many as we can throughout the show. But one thing to note that Thomas alluded to is sponsorship packages are available, and we'd like to thank our first sponsor, IBC Houston, for supporting this episode of the podcast. And from now until November 12th, IBC members can take advantage of a 20% discount on dues with the code IBC21, and IBC is offering the tools and resources to help you grow as a business communicator, whether you're looking to take your next career move, or want to develop in your current one. With fellow IBC members near and far, connect virtually through chapter and region events, or even through the hub, to share resources and seek advice from your peers facing the same challenges and successes in the industry. IBC is your outlet for the latest industry topics and research, career tools, and so much more, and it's all available on demand. So renew your membership or join IBC and make the commitment to learning, connecting, and having the resources you need for years to come. And again, the code is IBC21, and that'll get you a 20% discount on international dues to anyone who renews their membership. So special thanks to IBC Houston for sponsoring this episode of the Business Communicators. And guys, on season 3 of the podcast, we discuss frequently how the work environment has radically changed during the COVID-19 pandemic, and how companies are really changing the way that they do business. They've had to adapt. They've had to engage employees and contractors differently. And we're excited to welcome 2 subject matter experts to dig deeper on employee and external engagement. Without further ado, let's go ahead and introduce Stefanie Asin, who is the Director of Public Relations at the Houston Methodist Hospital, and Monica Silva, who is the Director of Employee and Digital Communication and Employee Volunteerism at LyondellBasell. And Monica and Stefanie, thank you so much for joining us on this episode of the podcast. And this is the first time we've had 5 people on screen at once. So, Stefanie, we'll start off with you. For those that might not know who you are, what you do, give our listeners a little insight into your background and what you do at Houston Methodist.
So at Houston Methodist, I'm Director of Public Relations, and that includes internal communications and external communications and creative services. And prior to that, I was a newspaper reporter, and I have aged about 25 years in the past 19 months.
I think that's all of us too. I was actually in Greece last week, and I didn't shave for like a few days, and I was like, "Are these blonde hairs from the sun?" And my fiance was like, "No, those are gray." So,
COVID hairs.
Yeah,
COVID hairs.
Exactly. And Monica, you've got an incredibly long title. Employee digital communications, employee volunteerism. Tell us what you do. Kind of in the energy space.
Yeah, so similar to Stefanie, I wear a lot of hats here, but I wouldn't have it any other way. I have the privilege of leading our digital communications team, which includes our external website, social media, our intranet, and our employee app. I also lead the team that does general employee communications for our internal clients. And then I also lead the team who does global employee volunteerism. So any kind of event that we have, we just recently celebrated our 21st annual Global Care Day, where employees can give of their time.
That's so great to hear. And I think volunteering is incredibly important, especially over the last 18 to 20 months. And I know bringing everyone together again, whether it's virtual or in person, just means so much more to have that connection. But I'll pose this question to both of you to kind of start off, but take us back to March 2020. Before the world dramatically changed. I mean, we knew the pandemic was, starting to run rampant over in Asia, and then it, made its landfall. I don't know if that's the right term to use, but it made its landfall here in the U.S. And we've seen so many companies, change the way they do business. So how has the employee communication strategy or, PR strategy overall changed for both of your businesses over the past 18, 20 months? And, what does your current office setup look like? Are you back in the office, still working remotely? Is it hybrid? So Stefanie, we'll start off with you.
Okay, sure. So it's actually a funny story. Right before we realized that COVID was coming to Houston, I was at the YMCA on a machine and the CEO calls and says, you need to get over here. COVID is in our hospital. And that is how the PR plan started. That Sunday, 2:00 in the afternoon, we had no idea it was going to turn into what it did. But that day, we made a plan that we were going to start this communication that would go on, which we thought would be a couple months, not 19 months. And it became a critical tool as we went through COVID. All communications, internal, media, you name it. And our only employees who didn't come to work were IT, HR, corporate employees. But the vast, we have a different workplace because we're a hospital system. Right. So all of our employees basically were at work. We ended up treating so far 24,000 COVID patients. So all of a sudden communications was in the front row. It was one of the most important things we did. Obviously the frontline care workers, their work was far more important. But we basically launched into 19 months so far of consistent communications. And I can go much more into this. I have worked at home a lot personally because I found that I can do this, sort of captain the ship here from home.
Yeah, it's wild how much it's changed, going from being required to be in the office every single day to having that flexibility and knowing that you can do your job remotely when needed. But Monica, what does it look like for you?
It was similar to Stefanie, but we had a little bit of lead time on COVID because we have a vast group of employees over in Asia. So it was kind of like dipping our toe in the water early with them and kind of figuring out how is their day-to-day life changing? How can we help them be better informed? How are we going to support them as an employer? So they were kind of our litmus test for what was then, this global pandemic that really changed the way we work every single day. Before the pandemic, we were a very structured company, kind of butts in seats, 8 to 5, every day in the office. And now it's completely changed. And I love how our company was able to adapt with the changing environment. So now we're kind of a hybrid. We work in the office 3 days a week, 2 days a week at home if we want. I'm in the office today and I feel like I'm the only one, but it's kind of nice. I'm getting a lot of work done, but I still feel really connected to my colleagues and to my peers, really because just the way of the world changed. I mean, I don't have to be in the same room with my colleagues to feel connected with them anymore. Similar to what we're doing here, 5 of us on camera, but feels like we're just having a normal conversation.
I was about to give you credit for the best office that looks like home office that looks like an office of them all. I think Mark Cuban said as we go through the pandemic and as we move forward, one of the questions that new employees are going to be, or new potential hires are going to be asking is, what steps did you take, whether to protect your employees or help set them up to succeed? So for the ones who didn't have to be the office, what kind of offers did you give them? Like come to the office and get your office chair and your keyboard, or how quickly were you all able to go from a butts and seats to virtual or mixed hybrid?
Pretty quick. I mean, so everyone who could work from home did with laptops and kind of made the best out of their home office as they could, with dogs barking and in your bedroom and your spouse or partner also at home, which was interesting at first. But sooner rather than later, we started to adapt and we allowed people to come into the office, get the things that we're going to make working from home the most productive space it could be, within reason. But a lot of people took advantage of that and set up their home office as best as they could. We started kind of the phase back into the office. I think it was around May. So we were in the office for a few weeks before that big second wave hit, and then it was all called off and we all went from home. So being adaptable, I think was a big message from us, the corporation, to our employees, was bear with us. We're all going through this together. Kind of, this is the first time we've done anything like this. Be flexible, be open. We're working through this together. And I think kind of that whole message came across in the pandemic. We're all in this together. We're all going through this together, that, I think employees had a lot of grace for the company.
I'm a little curious, and this question is for either one of you. With so much information out there about COVID, including misinformation, how were you able to structure your messaging to keep your folks focused? Even as you communicated externally to folks, how were you able to do that and still keep people on track in order to do what needed to be done during such a challenging time?
Well, for me, I'm sure it's a lot different because, I work in healthcare. So we already had this foundation, where we knew what had to be done because we knew it was an infectious disease and we knew what was happening. So the basic rule of thumb is if you had to come in, like the media team, for example, had to come in and they had to wear proper PPE, and safety was our number one issue, was safety of our employees. And, we were the first hospital system in the world to mandate vaccines. So that really changed things. All of a sudden, all of our employees were vaccinated. So it made it a little easier for employees to come in if they had to. So that was our focus, was safety.
And I applaud you for that. I was actually looking at your, when y'all went to everybody needs to be vaccinated. So thank you for at least starting that
that
journey.
was a communication nightmare, by the way. If you ever want to talk about that for an hour, call me.
I do kind of want to follow up on that, Stefanie, because I host another podcast called Cautious Coffee. And on one of the other episodes, we spoke on vaccine hesitancy and government mandates. And while I'm a huge advocate for individual freedom, I am very much on board with businesses requiring employees to get vaccinated. I think it's a no-brainer. It makes sense. And while it's always easy to follow and be a part of the crowd, from a corporate perspective, whether it's on climate change, whether it's on vaccine mandates, Houston Methodist decided to lead in that vaccine mandate discussion. And, over the summer, requiring employees to get the jab. And there was a lot of news coverage about it, a lot of conversation about it. And of course, now we're starting to see many corporations follow suit, whether it's airlines or other hospitals. I think New York just recently required their hospital system to all get vaccinated. But can you walk us through that process of maybe developing messaging and how that was initially received and kind of where you guys stand now?
Sure. So it was quite the learning experience. And it basically boiled down to what I call the 3 C's. It's culture, consistency, and compassion. And that's what guided the communication. So let's start with culture. We decided right away we were going to be transparent, we were going to be honest, and we were going to be open with our employees because this was a big deal. 27,000 employees. And in the end, by the way, we only had to terminate 153 out of 27,000. And we had to communicate the right message consistently in all of our communications. This is why we're doing it. We're doing this for the safety of our patients. Over and over and over again. Everything from FAQs to the CEO, town halls, to you name it. We had to be we were so open. We even told all of our employees how many of our employees were getting sick, how many of our patients were dying. We were extremely transparent. So they trusted us. And we needed that trust because we were about to mandate a vaccine for 27,000 people. So that was number one. And then consistency, same message, whether we're talking to the doctors, to the nurses, to the folks who work in food services, to the PR people, same message over and over again. And then compassion. We had to realize that every single one of our communications had to acknowledge not only the pain we were feeling as healthcare workers, but the pain we were feeling at home too. If you remember, there was a lot of personal stress in the beginning. So those were the keys to the communications. And we did a lot. I mean, we had regular emails, we had text messages, we had town halls for all 27,000 employees who could ask questions. And we developed this pretty quickly. And in the end, they realized, wow, we can trust them to tell us the truth. If they're telling us the vaccine is safe and they're telling us we need to do this to protect our patients, then let's do it. And then there's a whole media component. So I used to jump up and down and dance if I got in the New York Times once a year. Well, we were in the New York Times every month. I mean, I called this a media call a minute. The first 8 weeks, I'm not exaggerating, there was a media call a minute. We had reporters embedded. And that helped us with our messaging for our employees, believe it or not. It's the most I've ever seen internal communications and media relations integrated. I would send all of our CEOs emails to the media. I would use the media hits in the internal communications. And that was a really neat thing that came out of this, is how you can utilize both for credibility.
It's great to see that cooperation within Houston Methodist itself, but I'm kind of curious with other hospitals and other organizations, embedding different policies that are very similar to what you guys led on. Did any other organizations reach out to you guys, to kind of learn best practices, what worked, maybe what didn't work?
Every week. I think I had a call with a hospital every week, and it's a daunting task because it was so controversial, and you are going to fire the people who do not get the vaccine. It is a daunting task for all hospitals. And remember, if you Googled us, you saw that we had a group of employees turn on us. That to me was the biggest challenge from a communication standpoint. I was not expecting it. They sued us, 115 employees sued us. And that is something I can tell you I was not expecting as a communications professional, having to explain that, having to comment on that to the national media. So that was really challenging.
I have my own thoughts on some of those people. I'm sure that we probably share similar opinions, but we can't maybe express them.
I can't, that's for sure.
I'd be interested, Monica, I'd be interested to know about the process for LyondellBasell. You have hospitals who are mandating folks to get the vaccine. How are you communicating to your employees as to what they should do if they were coming back to work, or was that even an issue?
Yeah, in the beginning, when the vaccinations were becoming available to employees, our key message that we honed in on, consistently was the best vaccine is the one that's available to you. So if you have access to a vaccine, get it. It doesn't matter which one it is. So that, we had those early adopters, the people who we didn't need to convince, who were easy. Now, as we're getting into, months and months of this, we're really focused on what we call an advancing immunity campaign. So we're running a full campaign internally, encouraging vaccinations as much as we can, from a vaccine incentive program that we've started here in the United States to running a vaccine champions campaign where we have leaders from across the world videotaping testimonials on why they got vaccinated. We found employees who were naysayers and have changed their mind and have come up and feel brave enough to share their experience. People who've lost loved ones because of COVID. They're sharing their experience with their colleagues around the world to really encourage the vaccinations. We're finding, probably similar to a lot of workplaces, finding that the corporate offices are pretty strong in our vaccination status. We're getting, reaching the critical mass point. It's our manufacturing facilities out, in the broader areas that we're really struggling on getting vaccines. We have, Stefanie has at her fingertips are all of these medical professionals who are so studied and know all of this. Here at LyondellBasell, we're a petrochemical company. So we have a company doctor who we turned him into our internal Dr. Fauci. We made him the star of the show. We positioned him as the expert amongst us who can give us the facts and give us, good medical science to back up what we're encouraging our employees to do. So we've started, different series. We call him Dr. G. So we have different series. Ask Dr. G. He does his own testimonial videos. We have a great kind of almost a question and answer session, similar like we're doing here. And he's become our internal Dr. Fauci, our own little celebrity. So he's really liked that. I'll take that back. He's probably worked harder than he ever has in his life. He was probably thinking, I'm going to go take this cush corporate job being a doctor. And then the pandemic happened, but he's been great, and he's been a wonderful tool for us to use.
Yeah, it's great to hear. Great to hear. I am curious on the employee engagement front, because one of the things that we've all missed is that water cooler talk. Walking by someone's desk, checking in, see how they're doing, how their weekend is, what's going on with their family, recent travels. And you kind of can't do that as much with Teams and Zoom. You've got to be intentional about it. So how has that changed for both of you guys? Like, how do you reach out to employees and make sure that they are engaged and actually connected with what's going on in the company, instead of just clocking in every morning and clocking out?
I have found that to be a challenge for sure. What I have found that has happened is I can't touch base with everybody. I just can't. And so I try to do a little bit every day, and it is all through Teams. That is one thing that is for sure missing in this new world, is the camaraderie at work. I would say I have not found the solution to that. Monica, if you know the solution, please let me know.
I don't know the solution. I can tell you what worked for us. Because I lead employee volunteerism, that was one big piece that LyondellBasell really puts a lot of our effort into what we call our Advancing Good program. And we couldn't do that. We couldn't all gather together and do a beach cleanup or go to the food bank or anything like that. So we scoured for virtual volunteer opportunities, and we made those as engaging as we possibly could by, share something on our employee app, share it on our intranet, send us an email or photos of what you're doing, virtually. We put together kind kits. We sent letters to the elderly. We decorated bags for kids' meals. And we brought everyone together. We even did it on Teams. We said, okay, we're all going to decorate our bags on Teams during this 1 hour, log in and just look at each other, just see each other face to face when you couldn't be together in person. And you would be really amazed about how engaging you really can be via Teams or via the virtual environment, because it just became the way of life. I think the other thing that helped was kind of what I mentioned before: dogs barking, people, your partner, kids running in the background of your screen. You got to know your coworkers in a completely different light. One that really kind of took down the walls. I know myself, no makeup, glasses, bedhead, but it was me, and it was who I am at home. And I think, the team really appreciated a little bit of insight into everyone in their personal lives.
So we talk about Zoom and Teams and being intentional when we go out and talk to our coworkers, employees. This is more of a personal question. What's some points of tips of advice that you can give? Because I found myself suffering from Zoom fatigue, or whatever they're calling it now, of being on camera all day long. One of the reasons I got out of PR. So what are some tips that you can share for professionals to, push away, recenter themselves to get back in front of the camera?
For me, it's always just keep your sense of humor. To add on to what Monica was saying, cats. I don't know what it is about cats and Teams, but almost every conversation I have with someone on my team with a cat, that cat is going to get in the way of the camera no matter what. And so to me, it is just keeping your sense of humor, laughing at the stuff that Monica was saying. When a husband inadvertently walks behind the wife in the middle of a Teams call, you have to laugh. I truly think that's what it is don't take yourself too seriously. Get back on the camera and just pretend you're having a regular conversation with a friend, because you have no choice. I mean, the funniest things are happening, right? That's my advice. Keep laughing.
It humanizes you.
But the cats, I don't know what it is about the cats.
Even before COVID, cat videos were like the number one watched video on YouTube.
I think my TikTok account is mostly like cat and dog videos as well, and we hear a dog right now in the background, so it's absolutely perfect. But Monica, what about you?
I similar. I think keeping a sense of humor, giving each other a little bit of grace, and then I'm also going to say let's start normalizing turning off your video if you don't feel it, if you're not feeling comfortable, having your video on. So what? We do conference calls all the time where you only hear voice. Mm-hmm. And if that's okay for your employee in that day, who knows what's going on at their home or whatnot. Again, just be laid back a little bit. Take it easy on each other. Give each other some grace.
I 100% agree with you with turning video cameras off at times. And this is something that we've discussed on the podcast before, is there seems to be a lot of pressure on people to perform, and I don't know, like when you're on back-to-back calls on camera, it's very difficult to find time to eat or find time to get water or stretch or take a mental break or even get some work done. And so I think I love that you said that, Monica. Absolutely love that you said that. And Hattie and I used to actually work at another company, and we had kind of a rule that we wouldn't schedule meetings from 11 to 1 o'clock. And that allowed you time to go and run errands, maybe get lunch, take your kids to school, do whatever you could. And I think that really,
deep breath.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it helped from a mental health perspective as well, which is something that's so important. I actually think Mental World Health Day is coming up this week. So tons of resources out there. And we've spoken about that on the podcast a lot. But Hattie, I'll turn it over to you. I mean, what's your thought as well? Because you've transitioned from an in-office to now fully remote.
And what's really interesting, once we started working remote, March, I remember this, March 10th, 2020, we all started working from home, and I'm working in a new role and I haven't gone back. My entire team is a remote team, and we're all in different parts of the country, as a matter of fact. But I believe the team that I'm working on, what makes it easy are the things that Stefanie and Monica were saying. We laugh about everything, and I will always start my conversation with, I got to make you laugh real quick. Let me make you laugh. So
we can fact that check is true. She always texts and says, hey, remind me to make you laugh Saturday or something like that.
And that kind of sets the tone for the meetings, even when I'm, working with clients, because all my clients are remote, and I just really have this optimistic, upbeat attitude, because I just feel it's intentional and it's within me to be that. So I want the people around me, regardless of where you are on the other side of a camera or whatever, I want to make you smile, and I want you to be happy about being on this call with me. And it's going to be productive at that time. That too.
One of the joys of being live, and this is probably something that's been hurting me, and I've gotten to the point now where it's like, I know that we're going to have a conversation in this meeting, but I'm turning my camera off because I have to eat lunch. I've been in meetings since 10 and I'm going strong till 3. So sorry. But Jamie messaged us saying that, I love walking meetings. And I agree. Hey, put your phone on your pocket, walk around and do the talk. So, yeah. So this is kind of fun to get real feedback in real time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know we're kind of running up on time, and we've got to let both Stefanie and Monica go before we get into the rest of the podcast. But I'm going to kind of pose this question to both of you to wrap up. And there's been a lot of data and research out there suggesting anywhere between 40 to 60% of people will leave their jobs if they are required to go back to the office full time. And now, granted, this isn't talking about field workers. This is strictly, the office workers. And I know that now more and more companies are starting to send people back. Maybe it's on a trial basis. Maybe it's only 3 days a week. But I think as we start getting into 2022, 2023, there's going to be that pressure of what do corporate leaders do? Do they mandate, 5 days a week in the office? Is it a hybrid schedule? What kind of messaging would you suggest, or recommendations that you would give to other companies in terms of maybe developing an agile work environment, keeping that office space still functional, moving forward in order to recruit and retain talent? And Monica, I'll go ahead and start off with you on this one.
I feel very strongly that in order to compete in today's working environment, you have to offer flexibility for your workforce. I just don't think there's any way to compete with that without it. So my recommendation is focus on the good, focus on the flexibility that you do offer, whether that be any remote working days, flexible holidays, personal days, whatever those may be, 980s, 1930s. Focus on what you do offer, and give employees let them kind of answer to you and say, what is it that you need? What is it that's going to make you working here fit for your life? Is it just that on Wednesdays I need to leave at 3 to pick up my kid and take him to soccer practice? If it's just that, be open, honest, talk about it. And I think that we've got to get out of this thinking that it's one size fits all for everyone. I'm a single woman with no kids. So, I don't have a lot of, deadlines that I need to meet from a personal basis on needing to go here and there. But I do have things that I like to do in my life and things that I want to do outside of work. So, regardless of where someone is in their life, talk to them, take it as an individual, kind of on an individual basis on with the flexibility that someone needs.
Show people grace. That is something that I think is incredibly important. But Stefanie, what about you? I know you're a little different scenario with the hospital situation, but whether it's the hospital approach and flexibility, or maybe just advice to other non-medical fields. What's your takeaway?
So what I think is the most interesting is this is the first time our company's done this, unlike other companies. The vast majority of our employees are taking care of patients. They obviously can't work remotely, but the rest of us have never been given the opportunity to work remotely, maybe a few cases here and there. So it's actually the opposite for us because we now experimented with it and it worked. So now going forward, I hope that hospitals where the majority of folks have to be at work can remain flexible like we have for the past 19 months and allow people who can work from home, because you know what? It's been a great satisfier. Like the graphic designers are a great example. There's no reason they need to be at work and they're thriving from home. So I hope that companies like ours can remain flexible for the people who can be flexible.
Amen to that. And if you're watching this chat, this conversation, this podcast right now on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, or Twitter, let us know what works for you. Any tips that you have, and we'll go ahead and share them on the screen. I mean, what does your work environment look like now? How do you want it to look like in the next 3 years, 5 years? And share that. And kind of interestingly enough, I since I'm now in consulting, I looked at what my hourly bill rate is. And then I calculated my time that it actually took me to go from my old apartment to the old office that I had, which was about 40 minutes in the morning up to an hour at home. I think I calculated that it was something like $220,000 a year worth of time spent in the car. Now, I don't make that while driving. I wish I did, but that was what the bill rate was. And to me, that was just insane to put a number on it like that. So absolutely fascinating. But Monica and Stefanie, we appreciate you so much for joining us on the first live stream for the Business Communicators podcast. And if there's any takeaways that you have, or maybe our listeners want to get in touch with you, connect with you on LinkedIn, what is the best way for them to find you?
Yeah, I'm totally available on LinkedIn. I will connect with anyone. Monica Silva at Monica Silva. Same for Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. I'm happy to connect with anyone. And thanks so much for the invitation today.
Well, we appreciate it. Stefanie, what about you?
Anyone can call me about anything, anytime. My email's all over the place. Just Google it.
I found her, so you
see. I mean, when you're the spokesperson for this, you're pretty much everywhere.
You don't even have to scroll to the bottom of the press release to find it anymore.
Yeah. If you want to find, if you're a New York Times reporter and want to get in touch with her, remember she's got that quota once a month.
Once a month. She's running once a week now.
Oh, God.
Well, Stefanie and Monica, we really appreciate it. And thank you so much for joining us on this episode of the podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Well, that was a really fun conversation. We want to thank Monica and Stefanie so much for joining us on this episode of the Business Communicators podcast. And Hattie, I'll start with you because you're more of the employee engagement, internal comms person than Thomas or I. But what was
Not
your?
anymore.
Well,
Okay.
you were.
You have infinite more experience than I have.
I'm messing with y'all.
But what was your takeaway from the conversation?
They touched on a lot of really good things with regards to, interacting and how you talk to people and flexibility. And I'm really glad that Stefanie was able to come on because she also took it from a different standpoint where employees couldn't leave the workplace. And that was so important to understand about. I loved what she talked about, the 3 C's: compassion, consistency, and oh my goodness, the third one blew my mind. Okay, y'all know what it was.
Well, that's why it's a live show. We're
yes,
not
but those
pausing
were the 3 things that stood out for me, and I really appreciated her bringing those up.
Yeah, Thomas, what about you?
I found it fascinating. You go from healthcare, where you have to be there, must be present to win, to global oil and gas, where some positions are definitely you have to be there to work. But just seeing the differences and how Monica was able to say, we were seeing it come through by asking our employees in other countries, hey, this is what's happening here. This is what's going on. Here's what we need to do here. So I say bravo. And I also say bravo to Methodist too, putting their neck out there on the start, just saying, you're going to get vaccinated or you're not going to be working here.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. Again, I think Methodist was the clear leader in that. And I know that other companies are struggling with that right now. There's some smaller hospitals in, rural areas that are struggling right now with, internally they want to have those vaccine mandates, but it's going to be tough because the vaccination rates just aren't there for even their own employees. And they know that if they do have to do those mandates, they might not be able to provide adequate healthcare for people. So I think for me, the biggest takeaway in this conversation was more learning on the collaboration and, again, why it's so important to collaborate, not just during a crisis time or an event like this, but collaborate between internal, external, marketing, all business units at all times. We can't be siloed if we want to effectively communicate and reach our key audience and stakeholders. And I think that was a really good conversation. And again, thank you so much to Stefanie and Monica for joining us on this episode of the podcast. And let's move on to, kind of the headlines of the week. And we've got a few minutes left on the podcast. And so I think the biggest story in the world, probably this past week at least, has been Facebook. And there's kind of 2 reasons why. So the first one is on Monday. So I alluded to this earlier, but I was traveling this past week and I landed in Newark. Probably Monday around 3:30, 4 o'clock Eastern time. And I got a text from a friend who lives over in Europe and said, hey, is Instagram down in the US? I was like, oh, I have no idea. I literally just landed, pulled up, couldn't see anything. And then I pulled up Twitter, saw the news, saw that apparently Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp were all down for 6 hours. And I went to actually WhatsApp to message you guys in our group thread. And then I realized, wait, WhatsApp is owned by Facebook. Why am I messaging you there? So I had to go the old-fashioned way and actually text you guys. But Facebook down for 6 hours. It had large implications for small businesses throughout the world and significantly impacted, even basic communications in many countries. Because a lot of countries, that's how they communicate. They don't use iMessage. They use WhatsApp. And it's secure. It's fast. It's easy.
It's free.
It's free.
Yeah.
I'm curious on what your takeaways were from this and, maybe just your thoughts on such a large platform being down for 5 to 6 hours and how it impacts us as communications professionals and just humans.
The first thing I thought was, if it happened to them, it can happen to anybody. And then for them, I kind of felt bad for them that it happened, because when I saw the different memes, especially the memes from Twitter.
That was savage.
For the rest of you, welcome aboard.
But as for communicators, it really made me think about, wow, we have so many different alternatives out there. And it was you need to jump on those alternatives, because while Facebook and Twitter and WhatsApp were down, it was an advantage for the other social platforms. That's what I was really thinking about at the time. And for them. So, and then what is Facebook going to do about it? Not just for them now in the moment, but for the future. What does that mean for them? You know?
I also think it's very interesting that it came on the heels of the internal whistleblower. It's not necessarily breaking news what all she was saying, but it was breaking news that she was on 60 Minutes, and it was breaking news that she's getting the New York Times coverage from it. But we've talked about, I don't think Facebook's going to go away. I think if anything, it's probably just going to continue to get stronger and stronger, and we just have to understand it for what it is it's an information dissemination platform. And I don't see it shrinking until we start to see advertisers or small businesses or people to stop using it. And I don't think any of those are going to happen anytime soon.
Yeah, I think you're 100% right. And I did think the timing was a little bit interesting. So I do wonder if it was malicious. I don't know that we'll know. I know that I think Facebook issued a statement on it, but usually these hacks come out, several months down the line. I don't know that anybody's taken responsibility for it. So it could just been random. But when I look at the long-term implications, there are two takeaways that I have here. And so we know that it's no secret that, many small businesses rely on Instagram and Facebook to communicate with customers, grow their business, sell their products. And Facebook and Instagram have done a great service with their marketplace and allowing these businesses to grow, especially during the last 18 to 20 months. But I think if you're a small business owner or just a business owner in general, or a communications professional, it's important to remember two things. One, owned channels are still important. You've got to own your channels. And two, it shows you why you should diversify your platforms. We're not saying that you have to be on every platform, right? You don't have to be on Twitch. You don't have to be on Snapchat or Clubhouse, but make sure that you're not just reliant on one platform. And it's interesting. So at Pierpont, we've got our VP of digital, his name's Chris Ferris, and he actually sent a note out a few days ago to our team. And I asked him if I could share it, and he said absolutely. But it really echoes kind of what I thought, except he said it much better than I did. So that's why I wanted to read it. But he said, unlike websites, no businesses actually control Facebook or Twitter or LinkedIn. If a website goes down, that falls on the business and its web department or website partner. But when a social media channel fails, any organization who relies on that channel has no real recourse for restoring it. You simply must wait until the social media company itself identifies the problem and remedies it. As we saw on Monday, that can take many hours. So we gave a few tips and advice. The first one is be active. Investing in a diverse set of communication channels can insulate a company for outages like this. Be diverse by using a website plug in like LivePerson or Olark. Organizations can stay connected to their online communities, even if Facebook, for example, is not available. He also said, don't forget advertising. So running ads on only one platform can leave a business vulnerable to outages like the one that occurred on Monday. So he suggests that running ads on different platforms, whether it's Google, YouTube, Instagram, Snapchat, Twitter, or otherwise, can result in maybe a more diverse online audience. And then lastly, he said invest in first-party data. So first-party data is information that businesses and advertisers have collected from their own online sources, such as websites, email subscription, or apps. And I thought that was really sound advice. And Thomas, I know you're a data analytics person. I mean, what do you think about that?
I think the only thing that he's lacking is have a backup plan. Follow that emergency.
Oh, exactly.
Just have that. Okay, if this happens, no matter how far fetched it is, if this happens, here's what we're gonna do. Hey, we're gonna move our message from Facebook to LinkedIn or to MySpace, as I saw come across our screen just now.
It's just like Enron. You can't put all your eggs in one basket. You
yeah.
know? And I hate to look at it that way, but you're right. Backup plan.
Yeah. Just at least acknowledge that something could happen to the platforms you don't own. Something could happen to the platforms you do own. And to kind of think through, okay, if this happens, what do we do next?
Yeah.
And you don't have to spend a whole lot of time on it, but at least think about it in the back of your mind. And you mentioned first-party data, and that's going to get really important as we move forward the future. Because as we go through cookieless traffic and cookieless measurements, and so you're gonna have to start relying on your data from like Google and Facebook and LinkedIn, and Intuit and a bunch of other different companies. So it's important to start now collecting your first party data. Start to have those communication channels that you own, that you can put out the message from.
Yeah.
You know what's really interesting, Thomas, that you talk about data, and you know that these platforms do provide data, but still people are not educated as to how data can help them. And it would be interesting to me to see if people would get more into that. And when you're a small business, that has got to be part of your plan as well. And I don't think they think of it that way.
It's interesting you say small business. One of our past guests from last season, who's going to be releasing the top 50 barbecue joints in Texas or in the world, depending on which way you want to look at it, said it best. These barbecue joints need to put their hours online. They need to have their website updated. They need to have their Facebook pages updated. Because if I'm going to drive 2 hours to go to a barbecue joint and it's closed because your website hasn't been updated in 6 months, that's on you. That's not on the consumer.
Because they're so busy running the business.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know this is sort of an anecdotal example, but we had probably 3-4 years ago, Emily Herron for a IBC Houston luncheon. If you're not familiar with the name Emily Herron, you might be familiar with Champagne and Chanel on Instagram. So when we had her join us for a discussion, I think she had maybe 200,000-300,000 followers on Instagram at the time. And I think right now she's got like 1.1 million. And these aren't bots, by the way. These are actual, followers. Her engagement numbers are through the roof. And I think Fortune actually recognized one of her friends for doing, being a huge advocate on Instagram. But I asked that question to her. What happens when Instagram changes their algorithms, or maybe deprioritize your page, or maybe something happens and you can't post on a daily basis? Like, what are you doing to diversify your brand? And she said that was something even 3-4 years ago that she was thinking about, because I think at that point she was using some sort of app that allowed her to sell products or get like referral codes. Then Instagram changed it, so they wanted it to go through Instagram shops. And she said that was something that she was thinking about. And now she's got like brand deals. She's working with like Nordstrom on product lines. So she's diversifying her own portfolio to make sure that she's insulated if something does happen to a social media platform, that she still does have that source of revenue coming in. So I think that's incredibly important. But there are, something else that happened with Facebook, obviously, with the whistleblower. But there were 2 tweets that I think is kind of a nice segue. Then I'll play a video for you guys. But AOC, she tweeted this on Monday afternoon saying it's almost as if Facebook's monopolistic mission to either own, copy, or destroy any competing platform has incredibly destructive effects on free society and democracy. Remember, WhatsApp wasn't created by Facebook. It was an independent success. If Facebook monopolistic behavior was checked back when it should have been, perhaps around the time it started acquiring competitors like Instagram, the continents of people who depend on WhatsApp and Instagram for either communication or commerce would be fine right now. And then she said to break them up. So I think this is going to be interesting to follow, just hearing her comments, because there seems to be bipartisan support on something needs to be done. I'm not sure what the answer is. And I do think it's going to be fascinating to follow. But I do want to play this video really quickly. And this was from 60 Minutes. And so 60 Minutes, I believe this past Sunday, had a conversation with Frances Haugen, I believe is how you pronounce her name. And she's the whistleblower behind Facebook. And we'll go ahead and play this video and then get into the rest of the conversation.
The thing I saw at Facebook over and over again was there were conflicts of interest between what was good for the public and what was good for Facebook. And Facebook over and over again chose to optimize for its own interests, like making more money. The version of Facebook that exists today is tearing our societies apart and causing ethnic violence around the world.
So she highlights a few different issues. One is misinformation, and 2 is, the weaponization of social media. And she also says that, businesses maybe should put people before profits. But I don't think these issues are unique to Facebook. Mm-hmm. And we spoke about this, I believe, this morning when we were doing our kind of pre-show rundown. Propaganda and misinformation isn't a result of Facebook.
No.
It's been around for hundreds, thousands of years. And even if you take Facebook away, even if you take Instagram away, it's still going to exist. It's just people use different platforms and vehicles to transmit that misinformation and create that hostile space. And we even see politicians themselves, the same people that are in Congress right now, doing these testimonies, they're just as guilty at times of spreading falsehoods, because sometimes they are trying to stick to a party line, or try to put an inflammatory comment out there to either demonize Republicans or Democrats. And again, I don't think it's these social media giants that are the platforms. So I'm curious what maybe y'all's take is in this conversation.
I agree. It's not the platform itself. It's the person spreading the word. The issue is they have more opportunities and ways to spread whatever messages that they have out there. The only reason we talk about it being the platform, because that is where the message is coming through. If it was in a newspaper, print, whatever, they would say this newspaper is the reason why this is happening. So I agree that it's not the platform. However, I will say that the message itself, while it's bad, it has an opportunity to spread a wider based on that platform. And that therein lies the issue.
I think, first off, I was going to say 2 weeks ago when Facebook decided that Instagram for kids is not a good idea. It took them a little while to get to that realization, but I agree with that. But we talk about propaganda, and it's going on in countries where Facebook and social media is not allowed. Propaganda takes place. I think in North Korea, I think in China, and I think in some of the places in the Middle East where they have a minister of propaganda that's there.
Yep.
To control the thought. I think the real challenge comes into play is back in the day when you're riding trains and you're standing on stumps, you had time to think about it. With newspapers and traditional journalism, there were checks and balances in place, checking on your sources, doing this, doing that. If not your editor, you weren't going to be working for that editor for much longer. But with the invention of social media, which I'm going all the way back to message boards before even Facebook was around, there are no checks and balances anymore. And so if you get to a company that's Facebook size, who's buying up other media platforms, they need to somehow instill a check and balance process in their system, because liars lie. There's no way around it. Snake oil salesmen are still snake oil salesmen.
But wouldn't they argue that it's freedom of speech?
Is it freedom of speech to yell fire in a crowded?
Hold on. No, what I'm saying is, wouldn't you say that's kind of people? They would say you're infringing upon their rights. You can call it what you want to call it, but they're going to say you're infringing on my rights of freedom of speech.
Well, it's interesting. It's interesting you say that, because this past week, Alex Jones, conspiracy theorist, who's banned on all platforms, he lost his third lawsuit regarding Sandy Hook. And if you recall, he said that Sandy Hook was a hoax, and he was ordered to pay a certain amount of money to a family of one of the victims. And it was the third time that he's had to do that. And his lawyers consistently said that he has the First Amendment right to be wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And the justice system said no.
But
not accurate.
It's interesting how people will take the different amendments and policies and things, and they use them for themselves to make it work for them.
Oh, it's kind of like vaccine mandates and HIPAA.
Absolutely.
People have no clue what that is. So.
And we can argue and we can label people and call them conspiracy theorists or whatever that we call them. They have their own beliefs, the same as we have our own beliefs.
Yeah.
I'm not saying they're right. I'm just saying that's what they use these platforms for, to convey what they believe is their right to say what they want to say.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Right? Wrong.
Absolutely.
but it's funny you say that, because I was reading something about when the social media trolls got handed themselves, and some immunologist was posting something about, take the vaccine and do this. And somebody replied back saying, you need to do your research. Vaccines do this, this, and this. And he's like, exactly how do you recommend I do my research? I spent, I went to undergrad for pre-med. I went to med school. I focused in on infectious disease. I've written books on infectious disease. Google quotes me. So where should I go to get this, to do my secondary research?
Yeah. And that goes to interpretation. People will read a communication, read a message, whatever. They will interpret it the way they want.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, guys, this has been a really fascinating discussion, and I'm pretty sure we'll have more conversations on this as we move forward throughout season 4 of the podcast. But I want to give a special thanks to Stefanie, Asin, and Monica Silva for joining us on this episode of the Business Communicators discussing employee engagement. And I want to thank everyone who tuned into the live stream. It was the first one that we've done. So we encourage you to follow us on our social media channels. If you're not already doing so, just search @BizCommunicator on all the platforms. You can visit our website, thebusinesscommunicators.com, and we'll be doing this more and more. And we hope to have more engagement. Let us know what worked, what didn't work, how you would like to see us improve. If you've got show ideas, send them our way, slide into our DMs. Of course, we want to give a special thanks to IBC Houston for sponsoring this episode of the podcast. And if you'd like to sponsor an upcoming show or episode or our studio, feel free to reach out to us on social media, or you can shoot me an email to austin@thebusinesscommunicators.com. But Hattie, Thomas, any closing thoughts or takeaways before we wrap this up?
This was a really good conversation. I enjoyed it. Thank you so much, Stefanie. Thank you so much, Monica, for joining us. It was great to hear from you both, and everyone else. Just have a good day.
Yeah, absolutely.
For some strange reason, I feel like I need to do the soccer clap for the crowd, clap for all of our listeners and our thing. So this is my live clapping that the show that it was a great take.
Yeah, well, I guess my takeaway is similar to what Thomas usually says, but be kind, have fun, show empathy to people, and like and subscribe if you enjoyed this episode of the podcast. But thanks so much. And on behalf of my co-host Hattie Horn, Thomas Bain, my name's Austin Stadden, and we'll see you next week. Take care, everyone.